All right, Amogha, welcome to the school bus. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, to kick things off, we'd love to learn a little bit about yourself. Maybe you could introduce yourself and share a bit about your background.
Sure. So I'm an interesting guy, I guess. People say that I'm never boring, and the reason is because I've always grown up meditating and having a spiritual side, and I grew up in a business family. So, always had this sort of business side as well, and quite tech-oriented. So, built an AI robot, using circuit boards and so forth before Raspberry Pi when I was 18, and was associate director of a research lab at Columbia University in undergrad, and so wrote an MBA, helped run multiple companies, and now I've been doing a lot of investing and advising, and now especially the last 2 years in the blockchain crypto space.
Nice. So quite a wide gambit of skills and interests. Tell me, I guess, a little bit more how your sort of spiritual practice plays into your business side and your business ambitions, right? Like what you're building in the world. How do those two relate for you?
Yeah, so for me, I suppose the big part of it is the Bodhisattva vows, so the idea that we're here to better the world and help others. And so when I do business, I really try and get involved in projects that I feel make the world a better place, empower people to evolve, alleviate poverty, alleviate hunger, environmental concerns, social concerns. Mental health is a big interest of mine. So, anything that we can do to ameliorate others' situation, is something. I like businesses that do that. So I would never run a military contractors, things like that.
Right.
Not that I have a problem with them per se. I mean, I think, safety and protecting others is an important, it depends on how you use the technology, of course, but for me, I'm very values focused, and I want to do things that, are very much going to leave the world a better than I found it.
Mm.
So what are the things that most interest you in the crypto space? Like what sorts of projects are you looking at?
Well, for me, I really like the fact that you can have trustless relationships, and that has a lot of implications in finance, in governance, in social and community aspects, right? Because right now we're relying on a lot of outdated infrastructure. We've tried to mostly embrace democracy globally and collectivism globally, but because of the difficulties of voting and knowledge sharing and so forth, what you end up with, and there's a lot of censorship and gamification of media nowadays, and control and concentration of media. So there's a lot of issues in our traditional democracies where I feel that there's not wide-scale failure, but there's a fair amount of failure in the way our governance infrastructure works globally. And there's not enough coordination. And I think at the end of the day, most people who have somewhat of a spiritual bent all see ourselves as spiritual brothers and sisters, all fellow humans, and we want to find ways to work together to solve our common problems. And most cases, NGOs and governments are also trying to deal with this, but there's a lot of red tape and roadblocks, and I feel that with blockchain technology, we can actually do away with a lot of that. Not in a way of doing away with our institutions, but in a way of changing the way we interact with each other and our institutions, and in a way where if institutions are not doing the best job of taking care of their functions, we can easily spin up new institutions to replace them. Mm-hmm. And before blockchain technology, this was not possible.
Right. Things seem to ossify and slow down. It's not as much of a rapid innovation. And I feel like with this space in particular, just the amount of experiments that are happening is profound, right? It allows us to really move fast and just try out all sorts of new models. Like one thing that we tried in one of the versions of the Sapien platform was a form of UBI, where we would this was a few years back, but we were giving people tokens, and they were able to reward the posts and comments that they thought were valuable. And we thought, hey, that's maybe a good way to start. At least people can start signaling what they find is meaningful, because that was something that we were just not seeing in social media. And even worse, we were letting algorithms define that value for us, right? Which has just terrible consequences. So we are really trying to go in a direction where there's a lot more human creation involved and people are in control again, and I think that's a big part of what makes DAOs so special. I'm curious, if you're participating in any DAOs right now, which ones are you advising or a part of?
The big one I'm advising right now is Earth DAO, and so they also run social network. They have their own wallet. They were built on Polkadot before, and now they're mostly on ICP. But now, in terms of my involvement, I'm trying to help them rejig their business plan and corporate structure, and what we're trying to do is really develop as a layer 2 governance, interoperable level governance solution for the entire blockchain ecosystem. And the idea is to be as open and extensible as possible, link with as many chat solutions as on. Right now we've got way too much siloed data, and we've got there's a lot of friction in the system. So for instance, if you're creating a DAO community based on an NFT, right now in the current world you've got a Telegram and or a Discord, and then you have some tools which let you spin up the DAO infrastructure for membership, right, and voting, but they don't work as well as they could. The tokenomics, the staking, you guys have an interesting solution in terms of the passports. So for me, what I feel that we need to see is a more open architecture solution on the blockchain that allows different groups to work together to create a mesh of tools that work together seamlessly to allow governance to happen on a global scale.
So in our purple paper, one of the things that we look at is individualism versus collectivism, sort of the tension between that in our culture. And it seems like the business world is one of those things where it's all hyper-individual, hyper-competitive. How do you see that as a spiritual person who's looking to foster collective unity? Has that been a struggle in navigating that?
Well, one of the places that I've lived and worked is in Silicon Valley, and in the Bay Area, and that's where I won top 40 under 40, and so I've got to experience that culture. And one of the things I love about that culture is that they see value creation as the number one thing, not profit motive. So they look at it as, if I create the most value, then I deserve a portion of that value. You know what I mean? Right. And so to me, that can be a very spiritual approach. It's like, no, I'm going to just do the most I can for the most number of people, create the most value. And then it's fair for me to have a part of that, right? Because I've created it. And as opposed to, how can I extract something out of you? To me, that's a very unspiritual approach to business, right?
Yeah.
So the extractive model, I think, is hopefully dying. And the value creation model, the collaboration model, is how we need to go forward. A lot of the time when I've looked at businesses that I've been working on, one project that's a pet project, which I've put on the back burner for now, is to use computer vision and machine learning to do biofeedback, right? So that we can get people in flow states, help them meditate, be less stressed and anxious and so forth, without needing a lot of wearable tech, without needing to go to VR. And it just, right now there's a real dearth of computer vision people, and I think I found one person who can help me, and I've got another person, so that might come to fruition. And my idea with that too is to build it as an open architecture solution that other people can plug into, as opposed to trying to be a closed ecosystem.
Yeah, no, I really love that. I mean, if your mission is to help more and more people get into their flow state, I mean, that just, people will feel less anxiety, will feel like they're productive, will feel like they're deriving more meaning from life itself. Right, I think that's a very ambitious vision, and I think technology can be designed to do that, right? One way we started was like, we don't want technology to just take over our worlds, right? We want to be the ones as active agents to make the decisions and have the autonomy to do so, right? And if we want to build technology that we can put away, right, we can design around that, right? And I think this is something that really drives me in this space too. And it's interesting what you said around the value creation as well, because I was thinking about back in my mind that like this has always been a premise of like Buddhism itself, right? Like I was reading a few texts and they were talking about how there's like levels to doing good, right? You can do it. You can do something that's good for others. You can do something that's good for yourself, and then you can do something that's good for yourself and the world, right? And I think this technology and Web3 in particular has an opportunity to align all those things so we can affect great positive change while also developing ourselves. So,
of course, yeah. I mean, in the Buddhist framework, you have the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, and one of the eight components is this concept of right work or right vocation. And when you look at that, at a basic level, we use the concept of no harm. Doctors in the Hippocratic Oath have this, first do no harm, right? But then the next thing is, okay, what can I do to help? So, the Buddha said that, really great vocations are things like building roads and bridges and hospitals and doing businesses that, might make you money, but might also help alleviate suffering of others. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about love and compassion, right? Compassion or empathy is wanting others to suffer less. Right? And love is wanting others to be happy. right? Realistically. So how can we bring more happiness, joy, bliss to others? And if we can do that, then, people want us. People want that in their lives, right? At the end of the day, as a human being, that was, the Four Noble Truths, is at the end of the day, we all suffer. But nobody wants to suffer.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people struggling out there. I'm curious if you have any advice for people that are maybe just starting to approach spirituality, meditation. What are the most important things to getting started on that path?
Well, for me, I think the most important thing that matters when you're just trying to meditate is learning to create a sense of spaciousness. So a lot of the time when thoughts or emotions arise, when they're too present towards you, they can kind of overwhelm us. So for instance, if someone's shouting at you and they're right in your face, it's very difficult to kind of like distance yourself from that. If they're across the street, you can kind of tune them out. So it's the same way with your own thoughts, with your own emotions. We have to create, where some of these Vipassana shamatha techniques come in, where you just breathe deeply, slowly, meditate on your breath, the mantra, maybe a focus, building that mindfulness and building that sense of spaciousness is really the first step in any sort of, non-religious approach to meditation, is just creating that spaciousness, and then we can be an observer. And when we have this observational consciousness, then instead of always reacting, we can act, because we have a sense of spaciousness and a sense of non-immediacy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
You really have a voice and a way of talking that just putting me at ease, just listening
Nice.
to you. So, that's
I've been doing this for a while. Thank you.
Do you also outside of Web3? Do you also just mentor people?
I do, yeah. So the issue that I find for mentoring people deeply is people have to want to put the work in. So if you're going to become an Olympic athlete, it takes a lot of work. So if you want to really train yourself at a higher level, rather than just reading books and showing up to a class, then it takes a lot of work. So for me, I'm focused now on just mentoring people at a higher level who want to go deeper and do the work. So if someone's willing to have a daily meditation practice and do some guided reading and all of these sorts of things, then I'll mentor them. If they're not willing to put that time in, then I just say, look, it's not that I don't want to mentor you, it's just that my time is limited and I have to focus my time on people who are willing to also invest in applying what I tell them.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. I think that's been one of my biggest complaints about the secular sort of culture, the dominant scientific culture that's in America. Like, people start losing a sense of spirituality and like what it means to live a meaningful life. I think that's something, it's a journey for each of us, right? That, the path, it's our dharma. I grew up Hindu, so, it's something that my parents always taught me. And I think Web3, I want to, steer it more in that direction, but curious how you see like some of the spiritual communities forming, and if you've seen any DAOs that are focused more on mindfulness and
or is that even the right space?
Or is that even the right space, right? That's a good question.
I mean, to me, it comes down to the human values, right? Technology is the enabling layer. It's a tool. Money, technology, whether it's a car or, blockchain or whatever it is. We're using this technology, but how we choose to use it is a reflection of who we are and what our values are and the values of those organizations. So one of the things in blockchain that needs to occur, right, is a certain values and spiritual based maturation. And some people have it, and you see that, and I love that, and those are the people I try, to empower to do more and better. But people call 90%. I think that's probably a little bit excessive. But there's the majority of projects in blockchain, are not being done at the highest ethical standard. And we all see that, and we see a lot of like ICOs, which they'll have this huge run up and a crash.
Right.
Again and again and then again. Like there's something, I just saw a stat that there was over 12,000 coins, currently being traded, and most of those are shit. There's the term shitcoin, right, which I don't like as derogatory, but at the same time, I would say the majority of those would be the equivalent of penny stocks that are not going anywhere.
I know. I would agree with you. I think it's something that ultimately it's your own ethics, and both of us as founders running Sapien, it's something that we have to sort of hold each other accountable to, right? And I think first of all, US is playing an entirely different game than the rest of the world, right? Like the standards that a lot of people are setting for themselves here are are pretty great, but when you look outside, there's a lot of shady stuff. I mean, there's shady stuff going on in the U.S. too, but I think we're still trying to do good, I think, overall as a culture.
I think there's an interesting dynamic there. We're talking about like shitcoins. There's also, I think, a lot of products that are sort of artificially inflating their value. So it sort of makes it hard to like see through.
Well, people are consciously choosing, market manipulation tactics, right?
Yeah.
If you want to get in on the white list, you have to like refer 5 people and make these many comments. Now you want to hold the token. Now you have a lockup period. You have, things, like Looks Rare, in terms of staking and, the way it works. Looks Rare is, doing interesting things, but, they've purposely created a structure that's going to cause, this growth, in a way where without tokenomics you can't power that. So, and I don't want to comment on whether I think it's ethical or not because I don't know enough about it, but I can say that those kind of structures can be misused. And I do see them being misused, not necessarily by those folks. I just mentioned something that I know very much does use this sort of, structure where you're empowering growth through tokenomics. So I think we have to think about this, right? When we look at how we reward people, if you're kind of paying people to sign up and join and creating all the metrics that VCs and markets pay attention to, right, then sometimes it can obscure the value that's being delivered by the product, right? At the end of the day, if you are not delivering value, it doesn't matter what the tokenomics are. Eventually, the system will fall apart.
Yeah, I think, that sort of overfitting of metrics, focusing on the metric instead of the underlying value is such a big problem right now with a lot of things. And it's one of the things that drove us in trying to reshape social media, right? Like these social media algorithms that are just focused on attention and drawing people's clicks and eyeballs. I think we collectively really failed to appreciate what that would do to society and do to all of us. And I think we should have a greater moral responsibility to appreciate what we're doing when we're sharing information and sharing ideas, because that's the bedrock of our communities and our society.
And luckily, most of Web3, the good companies and the larger protocols and so are all foundations. So that helps remove some of the, pure profit motivation from the activities of a lot of the protocols and dApps and so forth. So, there's still the tokenomic side of it. So, and it's still maturing. So we all have to figure this out, understand what the ethics of all this are. We have to start talking about it, as founders and people leading the space. We all have to have the discussion and say, what do we want our impact to be? What are the, the same way we talked about this in the social network and with Facebook and their algorithms and, echo chambers and so forth. And so, what happened wrong there? And some of what we're doing with tokenomics is also going wrong. We're creating what's called perverse economic incentives. And so we want not to do that. And it's early, so as long as we're being thoughtful about it and being thoughtful of what the potential implications, ramifications are, and trying to be heart-centered and value and principled oriented, where we're saying, okay, yes, we could make a lot of money if we do it this way, but the impact for society is going to be bad. And not a lot. Let's face it. A lot of people are in the crypto space, or they're happy to adopt the moniker degen, right? And they're happy to make as much money as quickly as possible, show off their Lambo, show off their yacht,
Right.
And I think it would be a shame if someone with that kind of values, if the majority of people leading projects in the crypto space were people with those kind of values. I would like to see people who start looking at it and say, okay, well, if we know that we're going to turn this into a unicorn, we know we're going to have a big token pool, let's allocate some of this towards social good. Let's make sure we're taking an ESG perspective. Let's make sure we're being aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. How do we make sure that what we're doing is aligned with the good of society? And if we make money at the same time, amazing.
Yeah.
Right? But we're not going to sacrifice other people's well-being, or just put our own sort of materialistic gains at the forefront.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of the deepest thing behind why we're taking this as actually a digital nation, because the nation is actually just the group of people coming together. So we're actually trying to put that first, so that we're not even having to think, okay, as the secondary thing, how do we do this? But this is our primary focus, so it's the thing that's driving everything.
Right. It's one of the best like contexts, like, or container, right? Like what is this Republic of DAOs? We were just talking with Andrew from Doing Good, who's developing this social protocol to tap into all these nonprofits and give them a way to get connected to Web3 so that people can actually be altruistic and contribute and fund. And this is like really, really powerful, right? Because what we're trying to get at is it needs to be like effortless, right? Like someone is just participating in the community, creating value, but there's some portion of it that's being given towards social good, almost passively, right? Just by our actions and just by being online and creating something together, right? I think that sort of future where, it's just beautiful to me. I think something that is worth really putting in the time. And just the people we've been talking to, everyone is really just stoked about the regenerative aspects of crypto. And I'm curious though if you can share a little bit more about EarthDAO and maybe any of the tokenomics that kind of make it unique or
there's no token launched yet.
Okay.
But what I feel is unique is the ability to very quickly spin up a DAO. And on ICP, one of the things that we really like is delegated voting, on top of the container structures. So that allows, we believe it'll allow for much more interesting structures than you can do on Ethereum right now. That doesn't mean you couldn't create another blockchain sidechain for Ethereum, using Polkadot or something. And that's something we looked at. But it's still early. There's still a lot of features being developed, even at layer 1 solutions. So. But delegated voting we feel is really important because you got the situation where like you imagine it's the same thing with Discord, right? I'm a member of so many different Discords, as I'm sure both of you are, and I have thousands of unread messages.
Yeah.
And I just can't get through it. So sometimes I'll go through and quickly skim through, and spend more time on certain things and certain ones, when it's time to kind of do a cleanup. But it's not sustainable, right? So I feel that delegated voting is really important because you imagine that if you're a member of several DAOs, like if we get to the point where, you have the ability to vote almost referendum style at a city level and nested DAOs, so city, state, federal government, UN level, global, like human level voting, and sort of participation. And then you also have, any sports team you're part of, community organizations, a company maybe that's a DAO that you're part of, a collective. So if you're, just that alone, we're talking about like 7-8 different DAOs. And, if there's proposals coming by in each of those, like multiple a week, can you really keep on top of all of that? And the advantage of delegated voting is that, you can for time periods choose to give someone your voting power who's willing to put the work in, the due diligence, who trust, and any time you feel that they damage that trust, you can withdraw your voting delegation.
Right.
So that's something that I think is really interesting.
Yeah, no, that is incredibly powerful, and it's something that we talk about in the purple paper as well about the tribe, being that fundamental social unit, and what you just described is this like emergent system, right? That starts at the local level, but then builds up, and I think that people will have the choice to participate at whatever levels they want to participate at, right? But ultimately, it's again a sense of agency, right? Figuring out where you want to spend your time, how you want to contribute. I think that is really strong.
Agency and trust and building meaningful relationships really has to underlie all of it.
For sure. Well, and you mentioned in some of your documents about Aristotle and the foundations of democracy and economics, and one of the things we have to remember, the Greek philosophers always felt that in order to have a functional democracy, you had to have an educated polis. So if the people were not sufficiently educated, they couldn't make appropriate votes. Right? And so if you wanted to have pure democracy, which blockchain for the first time allows us to do, everybody would have to be educated, and not only educated, but they'd have to make sure they kept themselves educated on the issues they were voting on. So part of this is information sharing, right? And the reality is most people, unfortunately, like if you look at the voting participation in this country, in America, most people, don't really put that effort and time in. They don't vote, I mean, it's hard to say, when you have voter turnout at the levels that you do in the United States, and if you correct it for voter turnout, sometimes people get elected that don't even have a majority support because of this lack of participation in the democratic process. So, when you have delegated voting, the people who are like, well, I don't want to vote, but I want my vote to count, can delegate that vote, which to me is a much better system, because they can say, well, I don't know about the issues in this that are being talked about here, but I know this guy does and I trust them. And if they ever, break that trust, then I can always withdraw that, not 4 years later, but tomorrow.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I think it really starts with removing those misaligned incentives first, right? When you are trying to maximize, TOS, and that's the key metric, then you're screwed. Right?
Well, and if you look at politics right now, there's a lot of gamification of politics, right? Where people know, okay, like they'll be careful about what they do. They won't do anything so controversial in their first term to make sure they get elected. They get reelected, and now all of a sudden you see them do all this controversial stuff because they know they're in for another 4 years, and after that they don't care.
Yeah.
Right. So if we had the ability to have that delegation withdrawn, any time, they couldn't play those games.
Right. To I guess almost present a devil's advocate here, right? The concern then would be like the tyranny of the majority, right? Where the whims of the public have been swayed in a certain direction, and now it's all like pitchforks and mobs, and just as soon as someone does anything bad, and people make mistakes, right? I think just a simple mistake, if the president makes it, everyone's like, oh, okay, I'll remove my delegation and move on. I think that could also have some negative repercussions.
It's all about the context where the delegation is occurring. And in the Purple Paper, we talk all about tribes, right? And the communities that you're really a part of, where you actually are building trust and meaning. Those are the places where you're delegating. And we, like holarchies, right? This idea of like fractal governance, I think that's sort of the state that we're heading towards, where we're able to like leverage not only individual trust within our communities, but the most powerful thing, the thing that I'm most excited about, is trust between communities, where we're able to scale that up.
And that's what I think the passport really enables, right? Because you have these different communities that can see if tribe A wants to trust what tribe B's judgment is on a specific person, they can do that, right? And I think
if we had delegation working the right way, like if you're delegating certain decisions to a tribe or DAO, however you want to call it, that you're part of, and then they have that voting power, like you said. If they wanted to delegate the entire voting power to a person or an organization, they could do that through, like you said, fractalization of voting systems, right?
Yeah.
But then, and that creates a little bit of a buffer, but also I think in terms of your governance protocols, which is, something I'm very interested in, is what are your set points? If someone is going to be, if you're going to have a pass, we have this in corporate governance, where some things need like a super majority, something needs a simple majority, in corporate governance today, and then the question is, at what point of fall off do we like remove someone, and probably what it would be is if the support level reaches, say, something below 30% for a period of time, like, just because they dropped off for one day. Right, you don't want that triggering an event. But if it stays that way for a couple of weeks or months, then, we do, like, because, maybe someone makes a mistake and they see that, everybody's withdrawing their support from that person, and they can say, oh, you know what, I get it, you guys don't want me to make that decision. It's kind of like an easy referendum, and they can say, okay, I'm going to reverse. Clearly you don't want me to make that decision.
That's a good signal.
I can reverse that decision, and then maybe they'll gain the support back and say, and they can just do a mea culpa and say, I made a mistake. You trusted me to make these decisions on your behalf. I made a poor decision. I'm sorry. I've reversed the decision, and I'll solicit opinions and feedback the next time, because part of that process of having having this distributed voting architecture, governance architecture, is that we can actually poll, right? Which we don't do right now unless it's a referendum.
Yeah, I think that's one of the issues with politics. Like and it seems almost by design, right? Like people have such limited abilities to participate, right? Like I think in order to maintain engagement, you need continuous opportunities to participate politically.
Well, I mean, companies and governments do this. You have opinion polls like Gallup or in a bunch of different organizations. Even in corporations, we will do surveys and so on, because people do want to engage with whoever their community is, whoever their customers are, whatever you want to call it, and try and serve their interests. Because if they don't, they're going to become obsolete.
Right. Well, Amogha, this has been a very pleasurable conversation. I know we could keep going on and on.
Of course,
just scratching the surface.
Sounds like we keep doing this. Part 2 coming next.
I am curious though if one of the things we're doing with our passports is we're putting historical figures, avatars, people from the past that have inspired us or we wish to elevate. I'm curious, who would be your historical avatar on your Sapien NFT passport?
I think I would like King Janaka, to be honest.
King Janaka. Could you speak a little bit?
So I also grew up somewhat Hindu,
Yeah.
and King Janaka was the father of Sita. So if you know the story of the Ramayana and King Ram, and so Sita was the daughter of King Janaka, and Janaka was a great yogi. And so he was not just a king, he was a good king. Everybody, his kingdom was prosperous and was aligned with spiritual principles, and so he was considered a very spiritually elevated person, to the point where one guru had sent his student to study with Janaka. And when the student came in, Janaka was like lying back on one of these divans, and there was a woman feeding him grapes and another one fanning him, and this guy's like, he's a lush, how can this guy be spiritual, right? And King Janaka apparently was somewhat clairvoyant, and realized this, and so he started a fire with his mind on the other side of the palace. And one of the guards runs in and be like, Your Highness, there's a fire on the other end of the palace. And he says, oh, just give me some water, and he takes some water and sprinkles it in the direction of the fire. And he said, go check, and he goes, and he said, now the fire's out.
Oh my God.
and the young man, bows and says, okay, clearly, because he has this luxury, he has this position as king, but he has the detachment, vairagya, we say in Sanskrit. He has vairagya. So he's able to do the right thing, irregardless of his circumstances.
Wow. That's really powerful. I need
Yeah.
to dive a little bit deeper into.
Yeah, there's
Janaka,
actually a
yeah.
beautiful text ascribed to his teachings called the Ashtavakra Gita. Yeah, so if you're on the Hindu side, like it's a very, in terms of non-dualism, it kind of integrates some ideas from Buddhism and other spiritual sort of lineages. It's very ecumenical. It's sort of been forgotten about in the spiritual sort of yogic thing, but it's still available in Sanskrit, and some people have translated into English. You can find it on the internet. It's really cool.
Nice.
Now's the time to resurrect all that, and bring it back, because we need it now more than ever.
Yeah,
So.
definitely.
Yeah, but I figured that's something, a lot of people are going to pick Martin Luther King or Gandhi. So I'm trying to pick something no one else is going to pick.
Awesome. This is exactly what it's
That's
about.
good.
So, yeah.
Well, so one final question to close it out.
Yeah.
What does community mean to you?
Community? Community to me means a group of people aligned in values that, through a principle of love, support each other to be nourished and grow.
That's awesome. That's great. And glad to have you be a part of this with us.
Yeah,
Thanks
it's
for
great to
having
be here.
me on the
Thanks so much, guys.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Nice to see you.
Awesome.
Good? That's what you wanted?
Yeah,
amazing.